Viewpoints on the talk station FM 107 AM 1240. The Senate and the House are disputing, or well, I shouldn't say disputing. They're having a little bit of a debate over the topic of Common Core. Well, I'm going to say a debate, and I'm going to find out more from our guest, Dr. Terry Stoops, the Director of Education Policy for the John Locke Foundation. I think they are of one accord on this, Dr. Stoops, that basically Common Core's got to go. It's just a matter of, well, I guess, structure of that. And before we even get started, welcome. Thanks for joining us.
Oh, thanks for having me. Well, there is a bit of a disagreement here. It's interesting about these two differing plans to change Common Core, get out of Common Core, however you want to say it, are probably closer than most people believe. I mean, there are a few differences between the bills, but I think given some time, and time is going to be the issue here, I think the Senate and the House will be able to resolve their differences and come to an agreement on how best to move forward.
What exactly is the difference between the two proposals?
There are two main differences.
Okay.
And the House's version of the plan, they would definitely get rid of Common Core. Common Core would not be under consideration. It would be immediately expelled from North Carolina, whereas the Senate says, we're going to get rid of Common Core, but we still want the commission that we're going to set up to look at it. The commission under the House plan would not be able to consider Common Core. The second issue is that under the House plan, there are definite restrictions on what kind of data can be collected on students, and the Senate plan doesn't have any of that language in it. So while they both set up commissions, they both have very similar structures to how the commissions are set up and who appoints the members. Really, those are the two main differences.
There has been some concern, and I appreciate this, that if Common Core were tossed out, what would replace it under the House version? Are we talking about September of 2014, assuming a traditional school year?
Both plans would keep Common Core for the upcoming school year in order to give their respective commissions time to look at the options. The difference is that they come September 2015, under the House plan, there would be no elements of Common Core in our North Carolina standards. Under the Senate plan, they may implement certain aspects of Common Core, although I think it would be vastly different than what we have now. There would still be the possibility of some components of Common Core remaining in our standards.
What is the fear of the House that they want to make sure that Common Core is, I'll use the term, excised from all of the North Carolina curriculum? I'm assuming here that there's some sort of fear or concern if there's even a semblance, a thread lying on the floor that had some association with Common Core. Or am I just misreading something here?
No, and it varies by member, but the main members that are behind this, they don't want Common Core under consideration because their fear is that once the commission is appointed and once those members are identified and they start getting calls from the chambers of commerce and from the governor's office, that there are elements of Common Core that will remain. And they want Common Core indefinitely taken out of North Carolina, and their fear is that that won't happen if there is some intervention being sort of pressure being put on the commission that's appointed.
So my term of excising it, literally carving it out like a surgery and just removing any semblance of it is accurate. They really want it totally gone. Let's talk about that. Obviously, I see the difference between the Senate and the House, and of course, there is a question about the makeup of any committee reviewing the issue of standards in North Carolina. Is there not?
Yes, I mean there are. The interesting thing about this commission that would be set up is that they would mainly be appointed by members of the legislature. Mm-hmm. The State Board of Education would have one or two appointments, depending on what plan. The governor would have only one appointment. So this is a legislative commission primarily. So And the concern essentially is that you never know exactly who you're going to appoint, what is necessarily going to happen once they get on that commission. So they want to take all the necessary safeguards to ensure that Common Core is gone.
Dr. Terry Stoops, our guest, and Dr. Stoops, I get the impression that the House has this visceral dislike of Common Core, more so than the Senate. It goes back to something you alluded to a few moments ago, and that is the relationship of, well, you mentioned the Chamber of Commerce. We'll also bring in big business. And, by the way, the governor has expressed support for Common Core. Now, it is interesting, the lieutenant governor, although he has attempted on occasion to sort of tread down the center of the lane, the indication is he's also a big opponent of Common Core. So let's talk about the relationship with this legislature and the two entities I mentioned earlier on, big business / Chamber of Commerce and the governor. Let's start with the relationship of this legislature with the Chamber of Commerce and big businesses, because many of the major corporations there in Wake County and the Triad and Charlotte Meck have been very big supporters of Common Core. Does this create any sense of discomfort among the legislators and those parties?
Well, it's interesting because you find that there are some legislators on both sides of the aisle that come from the private sector that tend to be a little more supportive of Common Core because the businesses are calling it a good thing. So it's no guarantee that the party label of Republican or Democrat necessarily means that they have one view of big business versus another. The chamber's powerful. They have money to spend, and they've already spent some on advertising. They certainly have spent money on lobbying. So they're a formidable group, and it's not just the chamber. There is a group that was set up by some huge corporations called Best NC, and Best NC is another Common Core support group, and they have other issues, but we're talking billionaires are actually behind Best NC. So this is the obstacle that a lot of us will face when we try to talk about why Common Core is not good for North Carolina, is that you have millions of dollars saying, well, yes, it is, and these are people willing to spend that money to convince legislators, people, that they're right.
That is one of the things that members of the House that are so insistent upon the absolute elimination of Common Core are concerned with, that it would ever so subtly and incrementally be reinstituted in North Carolina. Let's talk about the role of the governor. To me, and please feel free to correct me, it's a fait accompli unless the governor, of course, decides to veto any legislation associated with the Common Core. What is the relationship with the legislature and the governor on this issue, and where has the governor been? Has he been lobbying behind the scenes on this issue? And secondly, is there a possibility, because I'm pretty confident that Common Core is dead at this point, that the governor may veto any legislation associated with Common Core? But first question, what's the relationship with the governor and the legislature?
Well, the governor supports Common Core, and he's made there's no question in anyone's mind he's a supporter of Common Core, mostly because big business supports Common Core, and he wants to be seen as a business-friendly governor. So he certainly doesn't want to go against the tide there. And not only that, the National Governors Association, of which he's a member, was one of the authors of Common Core. So he's got multiple ties to Common Core, and he's a supporter of it. The relationship between the governor and those who are opposing Common Core in the legislature is actually very interesting, because the governor has expressed that he would prefer the Senate version as opposed to the House version, because the Senate version at least leaves the possibility of keeping elements of Common Core in North Carolina. Of course, that raises a suspicion of those in the House thinking that, okay, the Senate and the governor seem to be colluding a little bit, or at least in agreement, that Common Core could be kept in North Carolina.
I think that's a great way to describe this. Now I better understand why the House and the Senate are having this dispute. I go back to my question. Is there a possibility, Dr. Stoops, that the governor could, if the legislation is as severe as the House would like it to be, that he might veto any legislation associated with that?
I have no doubt that a veto is on the table.
Wow.
And here's the interesting thing about the veto is that if the governor waits to the last minute to issue his veto, there's a possibility that the legislature will have left for the next for the summer, and they would not return until early next year. Would the legislature be willing to get back together and override the veto is a fantastic question. I think what the governor hopes for right now is that the House and Senate don't agree behind the scenes on a plan for Common Core, and that we get to the end of the session and nothing is ultimately agreed on and nothing passed. I think that's, for the governor, that's his best case scenario. But a veto is absolutely on the table. I don't think he would hesitate to use it in the name of standing up for the businesses who support it. And whether the legislature has the votes to override it or even the willingness to come back remains an interesting question.
With this dispute, the Senate being a little bit more flexible, shall we say, than the House, if there is a veto, there's no assurance that the House and Senate could gather enough votes to override the veto. So in some regards, Dr. Stoops, it might be beneficial for those that are absolute opponents and critics of Common Core that they be given enough time to gain more support from the Senate. Am I thinking clearly?
You definitely are thinking clearly. This is all mixed up in the really rivalry between the House and Senate when it comes to the budget, because we saw today that the governor and the House got together on a budget plan which the Senate opposes. Now, if the session continues because of the disagreements about the budget, there will be more likely an agreement struck between the House and Senate on Common Core. If the budget is solved quickly and the Senate agrees to the House and the governor's plan, which was released today, then there's less of a chance on Common Core passing in this session. And make no doubt about it, if it doesn't pass in this session, then we have a serious problem. Then Common Core is going to stay in North Carolina. And here's why. Next year is the 5-year review of our standards that's conducted by the Department of Public Instruction. And if they conduct that review, obviously they're big supporters of Common Core. They're going to keep Common Core. And they will have every reason to do so because there's no one else telling them not to do it. There's no commission. The legislature hasn't set anything up. So really, if it doesn't happen in this session, then it's not going to happen. And I think that is the worrisome part for those of us who don't support Common Core, of seeing this struggle between the House and Senate play on, knowing that ultimately the victim here is going to be the Common Core bill. That's a scary prospect.
Our guest, Dr. Terry Stoops of the John Locke Foundation. Again, he is the Director of Education Policy. This is a big story, and ladies and gentlemen, I can tell you right now, this is the first time I've heard the clarity of this issue as presented by our guest, Dr. Terry Stoops. All right. How many states? I know that Governor Jindal from Louisiana has announced Common Core is gone. The governor has put his foot down. How many other states are doing that?
Well, we have 5 states that didn't opt in, and we have Louisiana, of course, Indiana, and Oklahoma being one of the states where the governor signed a bill to discard Common Core. So there has been some serious movement among states to take serious action about Common Core, and you have a number of other states that have opted out of the Common Core testing consortia. So even those states that are keeping Common Core don't want to have anything to do with the tests. So definitely the wind is blowing away from Common Core. States and state legislatures are starting to realize that Common Core has not been beneficial to their state, and increasingly they're proposing legislation to get out, or they're passing legislation that's being sent to the governor, and the governor's taking appropriate action. So really, this is an amazing grassroots, and we talk about grassroots all the time. It's a grassroots movement because, as we said, big business supports Common Core. And so big business has been active in every state where there's a strong anti-Common Core movement going on. And these are ordinary people, moms, and you don't get moms angry, that are opposing Common Core successfully. And, really that's what democracy is all about, I suppose.
It is. That's what democracy is all about. But at the same time, there is a fear that with enough money and enough patience, the supporters will win out. And we're talking big money.
Absolutely huge money. In fact, one of the biggest supporters of Common Core is ExxonMobil, the oil company. They are a huge supporter of Common Core. They have Common Core commercials, and they have an initiative. So, here we have an oil company. There are insurance companies. I could go on and on.
Microsoft.
But, Microsoft.
I mean, we're talking, those three companies together combined have budgets bigger than all 50 states combined, probably. I mean, really.
Oh, absolutely.
Dr. Terry Stoops, our guest with the John Locke Foundation. All right, we've got some callers standing by. I was waiting for somebody to call in on this subject. Let's go to Lisa in Morehead City. Lisa, good afternoon. Yes, ma'am.
Hi, Lockwood. Great show, as usual. And Dr. Stoops, the John Locke Foundation is I just can't tell you how much that it means to the citizens of North Carolina. I just don't understand, Dr. Stoops, why we were, correct me if I'm wrong, we were the only swing state that did not vote for President Obama. And this came from Washington. This came from him. Right. And I don't understand why our governor isn't listening to the people. What does big business have to do with anything? What does ExxonMobil have to do with anything? We're talking about children here. Mm-hmm. We're talking about kids getting the best education. I want to know the link between that. Why are they spending so much money? Are they going to get tax breaks? There's got to be something in it for them if they're fighting for Common Core. And I'm telling you, coming from Texas to here, we have some of the best teachers in Carteret County, and I'm sure in other counties, but I live here. And I am telling you, this Common Core and hundreds of thousands of people on Twitter, all over, they're posting the mathematical questions that kids are supposed to answer. The teachers have to be confused. No, I don't blame them if they run off to Texas where they don't have Common Core. And besides that, the parents can't even help teach their children anymore. And you know what? We have to get rid of this now because it's like a root. If it keeps growing, you won't be able to get rid of it. I'm sorry. I was really upset.
No, that's where we're going with this. Lisa, I'm going to give him an opportunity to respond, but that's an excellent observation. Okay. Why is it that North Carolina has glommed onto this win? To your observation, Lisa, I think it's very excellent. North Carolina has not been a supporter of this administration yet. There seems to be a lot of tentacles associated with the administration. Lisa, thanks for the call. I appreciate that.
Thank you.
All right.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Dr. Stoops, before we go to another caller, your response to Lisa.
Well, first, thank you for the kind words, Lisa. You have businesses that obviously benefit from this. Microsoft, for example, would certainly benefit. The big testing companies benefit. And we're talking about, an industry, $1 trillion industry. Our education industry is $1 trillion industry. And so if you can get all the states to agree on something and then provide the products for that something, then you basically have a market that's across the nation, and with very minimal effort, you can absolutely find yourself opening up the market and profiting from it.
And it opens up the opportunity for propaganda. I understand that. But what I don't understand, to Lisa's point, what does ExxonMobil see? Microsoft, Apple, Hewlett-Packard, Google, there's benefit for this because they're going to require the students to use their technology and their products. But ExxonMobil, like Lisa, I don't get the reason for their support.
First of all, there's a strategic support for it that if it's coming from the Obama administration, you don't want to ruffle any feathers from the Obama administration. So you support this thing, and you want to look like you support education, right? Okay. No one is against education. So this is an easy thing for business. You support education. You want the highest standards. You want the best prepared workers, and so you're going to support this initiative. So So that's the other angle that's prevalent here among businesses that don't have a direct marketing to public schools.
I've seen recently some videos of professionals, sociologists, psychologists, educators, who are themselves very frightened of what's happening in the schools as a result of Common Core, specifically saying that it's not developmentally appropriate in many instances. It's unnerving. Dr. Terry Stoops, our guest with the John Locke Foundation. I've got to get to the issue of vouchers in a moment, but let's go to CJ in Jacksonville. CJ, welcome to Viewpoints. Yes, sir.
Hey, thank you for taking my call, Lockwood. Really enjoy your show.
Thank you.
Listen, regarding this Common Core, for me, this is very instructive. When Republicans are trying to make a deal on whether or not this Common Core stays or goes.
Good point.
How about conservatives? A number of these Republicans who claim to be conservative and run as conservatives, it should be a slam dunk. If we need to, let's treat this thing as a separate issue, a separate bill, vote it up and down, and get it gone. Not only is it instructive, but it's very frustrating. Because I am a registered Republican, very, conservative, and when I hear this type of thing taking place, I'm like, really, come on, we have to make a deal here. If it's a good thing, keep it. If it's not, get it gone.
CJ, thank you very much. I appreciate the observation on that. All right.
Thank you, Locke.
Thank you, sir. Terry, the question I have for you, and I want to get to the issue very quickly on vouchers. Right now, are you getting the feeling that Common Core still has breath in North Carolina?
It does. And it's going to have breath in North Carolina so long as we have a bill outstanding that hasn't been passed by the legislature or a bill that hasn't overridden a veto. So it's still alive. And there are powerful forces behind it that's going to try to keep it as live as possible, as long as possible.
Our guest, Dr. Terry Stoops, and I cannot compliment him enough for the outstanding articulation of the issue. All right, Dr. Stoops, two quick questions. One, the topic of vouchers. North Carolina is looking to eliminate future challenges of vouchers, and in fact, there's a talk about providing all the vouchers or support for all those that applied for the vouchers in this first go-around. What is the future of that? Will the legislature support it?
They will. Because of legislative action, the voucher lottery is going to take place this month. And there's a lottery because there's only 2,400 slots and 5,500 applicants.
Wow.
So the State Education Assistance Authority, which oversees the voucher program, has to choose the students at random for those 2,400 slots. So what we know about this is that it's extremely popular, it's in high demand, and that the current funding level for the vouchers is insufficient for meeting the demand of those who qualify and want a voucher. So there is talk, and I signed on to a letter, a few organizations signed on to a letter urging the North Carolina General Assembly to increase funding for vouchers for low-income kids to go to the private school of their choice. And I think they're going to do that. There's some indication, and today we had some indication that there is going to be some money added to that so that those families that apply for a voucher and that qualify for them will be able to receive it.
And will they write this legislation this time around as to keep it out of public education, since that was the argument of the opponents, that in fact all money designated for education, except for college education, which can have vouchers, and for pre-kindergarten, which allows for vouchers, that K through 12 would be available for vouchers in such a fashion that this would withstand legal challenge?
That's right. In fact, there's explicit language that says that the money that for the students who are taken out of the public school system will be restored to the traditional public school system, that there will be no effect on their funds for the students that leave. So they're being very explicit, very careful about it to really make sure that this is an ironclad program that can withstand the inevitable legal challenges from the teachers' union and those advocacy groups that are looking to pull these vouchers away from low-income families.
I'm still struggling with those advocacy groups such as the North Carolina Justice Center and others that have opposed the whole issue of assisting low-income families. It makes no sense. Or maybe it does, and I just don't see it. Dr. Terry Stoops, our guest. Dr. Stoops, if you will stay with me, I'll chat with you briefly off air. Thank you very much for your time this afternoon. Superb articulation on the case associated with vouchers. I'm sorry, with Common Core. To those of you who heard this program, what I'm going to simply say is you need to be making phone calls to Raleigh like 45 minutes ago, and you better start making calls if you want to support the House initiative